Yay, we're live!
Hey, Shankar. We are
Hello.
live.
We are indeed.
hmm It's been a while, I feel like,
Yeah, a
at least for
while
me.
since we've been live together.
hmm
Absolutely. Yep.
hmm What's going on these days?
Oh, just traveling the world with you.
Yes.
Yeah,
To do
exactly.
what?
To more traveling the world.
What have we traveled to see recently?
Well, let's see. Where have we been? Oh, we went to the Bitcoin conference in Nashville.
Yeah, and how was that?
I mean, it was definitely the best conference I have ever attended because the lineup of the speakers was unmatched, and also the people who attended were super into the thing, and since it was about Bitcoin, generally speaking, Bitcoiners are free thinkers. So that really shone through in all the interactions we had.
Yeah, and it looks like we have some people viewing live. So, hello. Thanks for being
Hello.
here. If
Yeah.
you are, let's see, if you are a Bitcoiner, type in Bitcoiner because I want to know. I thought that it's pretty interesting to see how many people have embraced Bitcoin. Like, I don't know, I got in 2020, and I thought that was really um, late, I guess, because I had heard about Bitcoin, but I hadn't actually purchased any Bitcoin myself. But if you're a Bitcoiner, type Bitcoiner, and then Shankar, tell everybody when you got into Bitcoin.
In 2016, actually, I heard about it in a meeting that was somewhat interesting because it took place at a local bar in a dark corner that used
Totally legit.
that used to be a strip club.
Oh gosh, the
Yep.
added.
And
Oh my gosh.
someone told me about Bitcoin. So I thought, well, that is interesting. And I just purchased 4 Bitcoin.
Mhm. And that was in 2016. So we're now in 2024.
Yep.
So nearly 10 years. And at like when you went into Bitcoin, which by the way, if you're just joining and you're like, what the heck are they talking about? I have a near and dear friend whose family reached out, and well, we had actually already talked with them about Bitcoin. And I think the general consensus is that people either think it's a scam or it's too good to be true. And after getting this message with a TikTok that I'll show you, Shankar and I are going to talk about it, and we're going to go through some of the concerns and then just tell you what we think, and then invite you to give your opinion as well. I think it's really important to kind of break down the stuff that's out there, really understand the concerns. I don't want to dismiss anybody. I also I'm just being anonymous because I also don't want to, just attract attention to um in any kind of light that might not be seen as like in agreement, if that makes sense. Because
Mhm.
there's a slightly religious tone to it, and I want to be respectful of everybody, and just coming from some of the same background and community, like having grown up in a religious community, I completely get it and I understand the concerns. But even aside from like eschatology and end times and all of that, I do think that there's like some legitimate concerns about um, the centralization or decentralization of crypto and where we're going. What does that mean? And all of that. And I remember you, Shankar, actually answering one of the questions that I had that I couldn't really express. So yeah, like I just kind of want to do it together. So I guess we can start with just showing the video, and
Okay.
then it's only 1 minute. It's by someone whose name is Ashley. I don't know where I get. Do I share my screen now? Do you have it? Do I have it?
Yeah, we still have it. Let me bring it on.
All right.
All right.
Okay, cool. Go ahead, play.
Yep.
I don't think people understand just how close we are to going home. We are living in the last seconds of the last days. We are watching the two major components of the tribulation. We are watching them be set up. The one world system, the mark of the beast. They have already been preparing people for that. We are watching that. We have been watching that. We are also now watching Ezekiel 38 prophecy get set up. The war against Israel, that's happening. That is about to happen in our lifetime. And we are watching it unfold. We are living in the last seconds, ladies and gentlemen, of the last days. And it is our job as Christians, as brothers and sisters in Christ, it is our job to share the gospel of Jesus. Because those that do not know Jesus as their Lord and Savior, your friends and family, my friends and family who don't know Jesus, will not go to heaven with us, and that is not okay. It is our job to share the truth, and it does not matter what they think about us.
All right, so that's the clip.
Woo.
I guess you can. Yeah, what's your first thoughts? Yeah, what are your first impressions? I guess.
Well, but I have not spent too much time in my life studying these things in detail. So my first question really is like the mark of the beast.
Okay, okay.
What is that?
Yeah. So it looks like I'm still sharing. Am I sharing? No, that's
No,
okay.
it's
Okay.
just the both of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's break this down. So the mark of the beast is like what this person is referring to is like the one world order. So a lot of this, and I have to just say, like, as a marketer, everything that you do is like significant. So the music, the tone, the cadence, all of these
Mhm.
things are meant to evoke an emotional response.
Of course.
Whether it's intentional or not, I think in this case, it was intentional because she selected the music that overlaid her video. But so this is meant to be a serious investigation into the end times and all of that and the one world order. And although there is no direct reference to Bitcoin, considering that it was sent to me with that in mind, being the concern about Bitcoin, this is the reason why I'm kind of skeptical about it. So I just wanted to talk about that. So the mark of the beast is coming from the book of Revelation, where there's talks of war, rumors of war, so famine and pestilence and all of these things. And the mark of the beast is referring to that there are numbers like this, like 666, and then some people think like, oh, it's a chip that you're going to get installed inside of you, and that's going to control what you can buy, if you can buy, and all of these kinds of things. So and so like there's like I think she makes a reference to Ezekiel 38, which is like an end time prophecy about war against Israel, and she believes that's happening soon. And then that call to action being the duty, like the Christian duty, to just warn people, like, hey, this is going to happen, and all of that. So it's very layered, but really, I don't want to focus on that. I just want to focus on the relevance to Bitcoin and why these two things are not the same, specifically because you had mentioned that actually DeFi is kind of the opposite of what a one world order is. So that one world, the one mark, whatever that is, that you must have in order to do trade and participate in the global economy. So now we're not just talking about local or anything like that. And I think so the fear about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is that we are moving closer into that direction. So yeah, so that's kind of the context of prophecies and like the link to Bitcoin with the one world system and the mark of the beast or any other digital currencies. So I just wanted you to break it down. Again, not necessarily in a religious context, but kind of like offer a kind of a balanced view about these technological advancements and why DeFi is different and why this is not the same. And if you need any help with the biblical part of it, I got your back. So let me know if there's any references that you need more explanation about.
So the mark stands for something what that is visible on everyone, or that they all have in common?
Yeah, so it's going to be, and I'm looking directly now at Revelation 13:18,
Mhm.
states that 666 is the man's number or the number of a man. So in the book of Revelation, there's this talk of the mark of the beast is a mark that people are forced to have on their right hands or on their foreheads to buy or sell anything.
Mhm.
And that number is associated with the Roman numerals DCLXVI, which is 666. And
Okay.
that number contains every symbol with a value less than 1,000 in a decreasing order. So kind of, like I said, super eschatological and very end times. But yeah, so that's what that is, to answer your question.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think actually the way you explain it, crypto and decentralization is a step away from that, actually, because if you think about what fiat currency is, and fiat, by the way, is what we have now, United States dollars, that is very much a centralized currency. It has to be, because in order to keep track of who owns what, we need points of references, and that's our banks. So we have accounts, and then the bank tells us this is how much money you have and possess, and that is very much centralized. And of course, all of our credit card transactions are tracked, and also that data is somewhat anonymized and then sold to companies, right? So if you
Time out, because I don't think you recognize how much you said in just that
oh, okay.
little segment, but we got to break this down.
Yeah.
So, what you are saying is that we, at least here in America, probably Europe, many parts of the world are already using a centralized banking system,
Oh,
which
yeah.
and things are tracked, like transactions are tracked, and we do have a routing number, bank account number, and there's numbers on our cards and all of
Ah.
these kinds of things. So this is already centralized.
Oh, yeah, unless you have your banknotes under your mattress, or unless you have gold coins somewhere that you then go and sell for cash to make your purchases. If you have a bank account and you use debit cards or credit cards primarily, then you are very much carrying that sign that you mentioned uh,
Mm.
already, right? Because that's what you need to have in order to purchase. You need to have that credit card or debit card, or nothing works. You go and
Mm.
walk into a hotel, you don't have your credit card on file, or you want to rent a car, you don't have your credit card on file, well, nothing works.
Which, by the way, happened with CrowdStrike. We saw that just several weeks ago. How
Yeah.
literally no one could buy or sell or trade. And granted, it was
Mhm.
not just limited to the banks, but we saw how affected everybody was by that inability to do transactions, inability to use your bank card, inability to check into hotels. And I kind of think that even then, yeah, it's centralized, but I mean, the argument could be if nobody has electricity or internet, we can't do anything either. So maybe the broader concern is really kind of stemming, like I sort of see this as every generation having the same concern about us getting closer and closer to the end times because of technological advancements that are going to
Mhm.
affect us in different ways, and people could draw parallels. Like if you don't, like you said, if you don't have your credit card, if you don't have your bank card, if you don't have this, like we know how handicapped you can be and you can't
Mhm.
participate in anything. And people would have felt like that with money, cash money as well, right? Like going from gold to money.
Mhm.
Like that's a kind of a
Well, I
switch right there
mean,
too.
yeah, I mean, I remember my grandparents and parents' generation when they first had to get used to using credit cards and debit cards for things that they used to not have that, like paying for parking, things, or purchasing a ticket to the movies. things where they like no longer have access to something because they had a certain reluctancy to using credit cards.
Yeah. So keep going with your providing insight. You're
Oh
basically
yeah.
saying from a technological standpoint,
Well,
Bitcoin is a decentralized currency that operates to, peer to peer.
So I think I don't want to go too far into the technicalities of how Bitcoin works, but essentially you have to understand that the fiat system that we have now is centralized, meaning
what is fiat? Explain to our viewers.
Oh, yeah, I said already earlier, that's what we have now. United States dollars, euros, all that is called fiat currency. It's basically the government's money. And so it is de facto centralized because the banks need to keep track of who owns what. That is known as, having ledgers about people where, they have a ledger and they have a side that shows the debits and a side that shows the credits. Well, what Bitcoin has introduced is that, and that's where I say it's actually a step away from that dependence on centralized technologies, that it's no longer centralized, is decentralized. And it is decentralized because that ledger that says who owns what is no longer dependent on one single bank or a network of banks, but it is literally on every single Bitcoin computer. Let's call it computer, also known as node. Every single Bitcoin computer has a copy of that ledger. And when Bitcoin transactions happen, all these computers, the majority of these computers, have to agree on a certain calculation. That's how much I will go in. But that means that nobody, because all of these computers have to be in agreement, that means that it is very hard, literally impossible, to rig and game the system or to bring fraudulence into it. Central banks, as we know them, they could very much, if they wanted, change. Imagine they changed the amount of dollars you have in your account. I mean, what power do you have to say this is not true, right? They literally, we are at the mercy of them being honest about that. Now, they have the power to also bring money into existence out of thin air. And that's what we call inflation. That is when they print money, and they have the power to do that. In the world of Bitcoin, that is not possible. First of all,
I just want to say one thing before you continue. There was a strike, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm entirely educated on it. All I know is I remember RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr., was talking about this on the Bitcoin conference stage, how, or elsewhere, because there was a private reception and I'm getting the two crossed. But what I do know is that the Canadians' bank accounts, those truckers and everybody that was on strike, frozen. They had their bank accounts frozen. So if that doesn't put, perspective into what it really means to be, a centralized entity or bank that can control things, I don't know what will, because you're at the mercy of, at this point, it's the government that's freezing your money. You cannot dissent. You can't protest. You can't do anything without the permission of the government. So maybe because it's not happened here in the US, at least not made the national news, we're not very much aware of how controlled.
Oh no, it happens all the time. I mean, it is a measure to ban like political opponents or foreign countries. It is used when we are in a situation where we don't agree with a foreign nation. The first thing the US does is freeze their reserves that they have in US currency. And whether we agree with that on a political level or not, that has very, very deep implications on the normal citizens of those countries, because, potentially, who knows, retirement funds, social funds are frozen in those US dollar reserves. So it happens all the time. And it also happens with smaller convicted people who, for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe they owe taxes in the opinion of the IRS, and then money can be levied.
So I just want to ask our audience, did you know that you can have your bank account frozen at any time? We've got a lot of live viewers. I don't think we've ever had this many live viewers. I haven't.
Oh,
And
really?
no, I think it's because he's playing with me now, y'all. But Bitcoin concerns, what are your Bitcoin concerns? Type them in the chat. Let us know. Maybe we can talk about it and discuss it. We're talking right now from a technological standpoint. Shankar touched it a little bit to explain how Bitcoin is actually decentralized and it operates on a peer-to-peer network, and how that actually reduces the control that any one single entity can have on your money and over financial transactions. And that's just really important that we understand. Technology is evolving. Technology is evolving. And as he mentioned, our parents and grandparents had their reasons as well to be concerned. But do you want to go into any more perspective or?
Yeah, I mean, although Bitcoin transactions are public and retraceable, de facto, they are anonymous. They are very much anonymous. That's actually one of its first use cases in its early days. It was used on the dark net to perform transactions that were not sanctioned by the government, right? So that is actually a step away from wearing the mark, if you will, because it's very hard to point the transaction to you. It is anonymous, and nobody, if they, like, again, the banks and the government and the IRS know how much you have in your bank account. With Bitcoin, you can be very private about it. This hardware ledger, for example, has a secret key that only I know, and I have Bitcoin on here, and nobody knows how much. Bitcoin,
Yeah, that's actually a problem, because you talked about how much Bitcoin is floating around.
Yeah,
Inaccessible because people can't access.
Bitcoin doesn't have to be connected to the internet. We call this cold storage. Most
Oh, wow.
most people have Bitcoin in their Coinbase account or on their wallets in their smartphones, but it can be on a device like this, or we can go even further and we can have a piece of paper that has a public code and a secret code, a private code. I actually did that this morning when we
Oh,
gifted.
interesting. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Go ahead.
So you
When
scan
we
the public code, you send some Bitcoin to that address. It's totally anonymous. Nobody knows that. And, as long as that address has not been linked to an identity, which we call doxed in the ecosystem, it's anonymous. So I would really, really make a case for this is actually a step away from what you were explaining. A very new concept to me, actually, which may be a surprise to a lot of people. So we have a comment here. Okay, if tomorrow the US government decides to create its own cryptocurrency and no longer recognizes Bitcoin, what happens? That's a great question. So a lot of governments, they actually want to use the technology of cryptocurrencies and create a central digital currency.
Right.
Well, that defies the entire purpose of why cryptocurrency was first brought in by Satoshi. As always, you can use a technology for either good or bad. You can use nuclear energy for what it was intentionally, maybe by the scientists had in mind, to bring energy to everyone that's clean and everlasting. But then warlords see something else in it. They see a nuclear bomb. So then Robert says, what if the government no longer recognizes Bitcoin? So that is
Well,
actually...
wait, I have a question.
Yeah, I
Does
want to
'cause
address that, though, because it's an important question.
I know. It's a question about the
Yeah.
question. So there's this implicit assumption that the US government already recognizes Bitcoin. So what's the answer, Shankar? Does the US government recognize Bitcoin or not?
Yeah. See, the power in cryptocurrency is with the people, not with the government. Because what happens actually when you mint a Bitcoin or you mine a Bitcoin is that you have a large number of people who agree, independent of the government, that in return for that digital representation of a coin, there's value attached to it. And that value is already in the system. And that value is there, and nobody can erase it because it is locked in the system. So as long as there is Bitcoin floating around, or any other cryptocurrency for that matter, you have people who are willing to exchange it for the United States dollar that the US government is oh so happy to accept, right? So there is a market, because it is like saying, well, what if the government no longer recognizes the value of gold? Well, that's the government's problem, because you can take your gold coin and go somewhere where people are like, I want this gold, and I'm going to give you whatever you want in return for it. Right.
So that's exactly it. That is the problem. It is the government's problem.
Yeah.
You can't just mint and print more Bitcoin. There's only 121 million Bitcoin, period.
Yeah.
The end. So that's what people are doing right now. And I don't think people at whole en masse don't understand that what part of what makes inflation is the printing of money that we do not have, that used to be backed by gold. So the gold, the certificate that you, aka the dollar, would be representative of the gold that you possessed. You would exchange it. Do I have that right?
Mm-hmm.
Or silver or whatever.
Yeah.
So once we got off of that standard to do war, it ceased to mean anything. Gold still retained its value, but the government was no longer using that as the standard to recognize how much value people held in terms of money, wealth, and currency became the US dollar. So with Bitcoin, it's the community that is deciding this has value, exactly as you said. And that is dangerous because the government can't decide how much, the government cannot make more.
I like
Bitcoin.
to give an analogy, but actually, if you go to one of those festivals where at the beginning, at the start of the area, there's a booth, and you have to buy these red coupons to exchange for food inside, right? So the moment you exchange your US dollars for those coupons, that is the moment you care about those coupons. And the vendors inside do too, because they know there's a pool of money where I can take my coupons and I can go back to the front and exchange them into money. Now imagine, exchange them. Imagine, Robert, the government would say, no, we don't recognize those red coupons. Well, do you think the attendees of the festival or the vendors would care? No, for as long as there's a pot where the community agrees that there is exchange of the one thing against the other thing, that will work. Doesn't matter what the government says. So that is a perfect analogy or metaphor of what we do with Bitcoin. It's just in a digital way.
Yeah, so in that case, I kind of feel like this argument about Bitcoin being related to the mark of the beast, the end times, um, centralized one world order couldn't be further from the truth. If anything, it gives us all more protection because we have agency and because we as a community decide the value of this currency. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think there's somewhat always fear around new things, around technological advances, around things we don't understand. But I don't think that means that it then is phony or doesn't work. And I think we should be very careful as well and guarded about what we allow our government, who is supposed to represent the people, tell us what is what. Because then we've kind of lost our way because we know, and I'm not going to even go down the rabbit hole of, anything else religious, but uh, thinking for oneself, making critical choices and doing all of these things, especially if it's in your own best interest, and your community's interest, is something to be more valued, I think, over fear. Which, if you listen to the beginning of that TikTok, it's fear. Like the first thing I thought was like, my heart is arrested because there's fear. And we'll link the TikTok so you can know what we're talking about. A friend of mine's family sent this just to explain the hesitation and reluctance to getting into the whole crypto world and Bitcoin. And I appreciate that. So that's why we're asking, that's why we're having this live, and why we're asking you, what are your concerns about Bitcoin? Not necessarily only limited to the religiosity of it, but anything else, any viable concern. Robert had a great question, a legitimate question that a lot of people have. What's the because we're so used to getting our money from the government. Well, what now? And what does it mean if they don't recognize it? And I think for me, it just means if we ever get to the point where the government controls us that much, where they determine, like another thing that Shankar had mentioned, not on this live, the dollar is always fluctuating. We just don't pay attention to it. The dollar is constantly losing its value, which is the reason why people are turning to Bitcoin and other crypto. There are people all around the world who have been controlled by their country's fluctuation and instability of their currency. So that's something else to keep in mind too, that a lot of people are getting set free by embracing a different way to do business and to get paid.
Yeah, it is. You hold a lot of power when you can define what legal tender is. And you hold even more power when you can secretly inject more of that into the economy, which is printing money. Now, I do want to say that the Federal Reserve Bank uses the issuing of more money as an important lever in organizing our world economy and our national economy. So they do work with it, but on an individual level, they hurt us a lot by increasing inflation and taking away the buying power of our currency. As with everything, there's always two sides of the coin, right?
Pun intended. How does it take away the buying power?
Well, it takes away the buying power because what your $100 bill can afford today is not what it used to be able to afford 10 years ago. And you're asking why? Well, because in these 10 years, the Federal Reserve Bank has just injected a lot more dollars into the ecosystem. So if there's more around, well, then they have less value as an individual dollar. So Robert says, you stated the US government does not know how much crypto you own. However, every time you spend it, sell it, a record of the transaction will be sent to the IRS, so it is monitored in a certain respect, correct? So it is de facto anonymous. You have to, if you want to abide by the law, which is highly recommended, then now you have to report your holdings to the IRS. Also, the large exchanges that give you Bitcoin in return for your United States dollars have to report back to the IRS more and more what kind of holdings individuals have. There's more and more KYC, know your customer, that is introduced into this ecosystem. But we are not that far yet, and I would imagine that a lot of people would be very much opposed to that. We are not that far in where the address of your personal hardware ledger, for instance, is revealed to the authorities. So just like a lot of people would have a big problem with everyone knowing exactly what you hold under your mattress or in your vault at home, it's the same. But
Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, the purpose, by the way, of cryptocurrencies should not be, the primary purpose should not be to avoid taxation. That is not the primary purpose. The primary purpose is to have decentralized store of value that can be easily, freely, and cheaply transported and sent from one point to another. And that also is not, there's no inflation possible, and nobody can prevent you from owning it. Nobody can prevent you from owning it because there's no centralized control. Let me explain. There is a woman in where there's a woman in I forget the country, well, some country in Eastern Europe, and she had an Instagram account where she went into abandoned facilities and just posted these photos. So one day she goes into an old abandoned military facility that has been on the internet a gazillion times, YouTube videos, photo galleries, you name it. But for whatever reason, the government of that country decided that she was a spy. So they took her into custody and she was given house arrest. She could not leave the country during the investigation. That is still the case right now. So, of course, her bank accounts were frozen. Nobody can send the woman money so she can support herself. However, she owns one of those things that has an address, and all her followers can send her Bitcoin, and nobody can prevent it because it is decentralized. Because it's impossible for that government to shut down all of these computers that I mentioned earlier and prevent them from agreeing that if you send that woman Bitcoin, she owns that Bitcoin.
And I did want to say, because I wrote a newsletter on LinkedIn about some noteworthy quotes that a lot of our political candidates, we know Robert F. Kennedy spoke, we know that Trump spoke, and at the conference, and they are. So one thing to understand is that in terms of tax policy and privacy, there are things to still change, but we're way further along in Bitcoin than we are with the current central system that we have now. And so one of the things that he said was that he being RFK, was that he would actually reverse it. Like, I'm telling you today that I will never ever sign a law that taxes direct ownership of Bitcoin. A little bit different, but it's just an idea, like a glimpse of what can happen. I will use my power to reverse any law that does so. I will end the Biden administration war on Bitcoin, because the whole goal, like the war is kind of like, how much information can we get out of you? How much can we control if we ever do want to stop your bank account because you're dissenting and all of these things? So providing, more policy and legislation around the things that actually, work in the favor of whatever that administration is, they're going to go for that. They're going to gun for that. And then the opposite is also true, where you have politicians that come in that will try to create more freedom. Snowden also expressed the concerns, some of the same concerns that Robert has. And these things are not perfect, but again, it's way further away from, if you just look at what the activity is that can be monitored in our current accounts, then you'll see that there are differences. One of them being that the record keeping. So Shankar kind of hinted at it. Although the government may not track your total crypto holdings directly, they do have ways to piece together the activity. But the IRS is not going to piece together the activity of 121 million Bitcoin spread throughout the world, because it's not just one nation as well.
Also, the point of entry into the cryptocurrency system relies on what we call these centralized exchanges. The best known one is Coinbase. And Coinbase is a business that has to abide by the law. So yeah, they have to keep track on when you exchange your US dollars for Bitcoin. But there's other ways to get Bitcoin. You can mine it yourself. And there is a growing community also where people who just have Bitcoin are willing to exchange it in a market that's just like, I give you Bitcoin, you send me some money. And then again, when you can buy one of these and someone gives you Bitcoin and then you send it around.
That is so cool that's
that is not, it's traceable, but if nobody knows your address, then nobody knows, right? Again,
but more opportunity for anonymity.
The purpose is really not tax evasion. That is a whole different.
Speak for yourself. Some of us believe taxes are robbery.
No. Well, I was going to say that is a whole different.
Type robbery in the chat. Robbery. Taxes are robbery.
No. Abide by the law. Pay your taxes and all of that.
I don't want to get the IRS on our tails.
I do that too, and it hurts. But that's a whole different. That's a political conversation.
We need to have a conversation.
I wanted to thank Damien here for supporting us. He's a fellow herd member with Elephant Money, which is also a type of cryptocurrency that is an alternative to Bitcoin. So there's a lot out there. And he
Damien's my favorite.
Yeah, he agrees that is robbery.
Robbery.
So, what really is robbery is inflation, right? That is just hidden taxation. And like we as Bitcoiners and crypto enthusiasts, we don't like it. Who likes inflation? I don't know. Some people probably do. Like if you own a bank and lots of money is printed and people take on more loans, rack up more credit card debt, yes, then the bank directors, the bankers love that. Yeah.
Well, I think it's been a good conversation. We'll have to have a conversation about what to do with all of that money. When you get taxes, where do you go? Wink, wink. Like, wait, that sounds horrible.
What do you mean?
I mean, let's have a conversation of the pros and cons of like living in places where taxes are lower and there may be certain benefits to people that have crypto holdings, and what all does that entail, and get the community involved. You guys can write your thoughts and opinions on what it means to, because we're paying a lot in taxes now.
Yeah.
A lot.
Well, I mean, I think that's a different live. I mean, we can.
That's what I said. That's what I meant.
Oh, okay.
I want to have a conversation about that. Not now.
Yeah.
That's why I said this has been great. Tune in next time so we can talk about that.
Yeah. Damien wants to have a conversation about that. I mean, I reveal that much, that we are planning a longer stay in Puerto Rico, since for US citizens, that is really one of the very few options to pay lower taxes on crypto. But it's not as easy as it sounds. The more we look into it, the more we're like, okay, you really, really have to be very wealthy for all of those inconveniences to make sense. But
you'll see how I can't talk about this, but he can talk about this. You guys see this?
No. I just wanted to give a sneak peek, like not the whole conversation.
Do as I say, not as I do.
No. Listen, all I want to say is in January, we will create a lot of content from Puerto Rico, and you'll enjoy all of that.
Yeah. you guys like this conversation? Have any of your concerns been alleviated? Does it make sense why we need to have broader conversations about, our concerns? And they're legitimate, by the way. I really like the points that Robert brought up. I really think that we
Yeah.
need to look into all these things, crypto exchange reporting and taxable things, events and 1099 forms and all these kinds of things. Like, how much does the government have a look into that, and how does that affect us? Does it affect us? Why should we care? Why shouldn't we be overburdened by it? Because ultimately, if it's community driven, then that's why we want to have these conversations, because it is, our heart's desire that everyone have financial freedom.
Yeah.
Because we have it, and we know that a huge part of that comes with taking risk and being an early adopter and getting involved in things. So we just want to answer your concerns and have Q&As. And now Robert has another comment, as well as Damien, about looking forward to the conversations to come and when the next live. Not sure. Shankar and I did this spontaneously. I dragged him on. He didn't even know the TikTok that I was going to show him, which, by the way, again,
Yeah.
we'll put in the comments.
And then in your future agendas, like the whole tax and all of that. That's the hornet's nest, Andrea. Let's
I'm
keep that a little
sorry.
bit on the side.
I'm still a noob at some of these things. I'm learning as I go, and I like sharing.
Yeah, like you have to pick the crown jewel of difficulty here to discuss in our first live.
I was just trying to find a quote relevant to some of the things we were talking about, because RFK brought it up, and I was like, oh, that's I'm looking through some of the notes that I took, and that was one of the ones that stood out.
Typically, just so you know, the disclaimer is, well, you got to talk to your CPA about that. I can make no comments. That's not. And you take us into the whole thing here.
No, this is great. This is me enjoying this journey as well. Shankar, you can't have all the fun.
Yeah.
Crypto is so fun. There's so much to learn.
Here we have a great question by Robert. That's a good one. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you, Andrea? I have
No. We gotta shut this down soon so we can do our second workout for our 75 hard.
So Robert states correctly, there was a gold standard, and then the government decided to do away with it and print money as they wish. What's to prevent governments to do the same with crypto? That is such a great question, Robert. What prevents them from doing it is that it is impossible. By definition of how Bitcoin works, and most of the cryptocurrencies out there, it's impossible. They have an upper ceiling. There can only ever be a certain amount of Bitcoin in circulation. And that makes it impossible for them. The only...
and that being 121 million, right?
Yeah,
and how much is one Bitcoin right now?
Yeah. Right now, one Bitcoin is worth 60,978, roughly speaking. The only exception, Robert, is if the government could impose their central banking digital currency. Again, then they would, but that would make absolutely no sense to Bitcoiners, because it would just be fiat as a digital version. Nobody wants that other than governments, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, how would you devalue? Because it's the problem with the paper printing is, of course, the inflation and the devaluation. And who was it, Nixon, that brought us off to fight whatever war was happening in the 70s?
The Vietnam War
Okay.
needed to be funded. And I think it was the Vietnam War that needed to be funded. And now I haven't researched that in depth, whether that was truly the reason. But, it
was one of the side effects for sure. Yeah, but what I appreciate about this...
Yeah.
What I appreciate about this question is because it really shows us how it's so hard for us to wrap our head around something that's decentralized. Is basically what you're saying. Like, it's impossible for the government to centralize what's already decentralized unless they create their own centralized bank, in which case you would have to opt into. Now, if you opt into that, then that's something that's entirely different. But as it stands with Bitcoin, that is something they can't touch, which is the reason why people are just so unhappy about it in our government and governments around the world. Which is why go ahead.
And they'll probably attempt it, you know. I think there's also countries around the world where they have already instituted that, and they lure you in with little bribes, with little freebies, like adopt our central banking digital currency, and anyone who accepts to use it as tender gets a monthly stipend, you know. Talk about universal basic income. Also sound familiar, COVID checks, right? But yeah, we as Bitcoiners, we are very, very much against that. Like, we don't want the government's business in our business.
But to answer your question, well, it's not really answering your question, but going further, Shankar, to your point about countries establishing a centralized digital currency, China did it with the yuan. I remember reading The Economist about it, and they gave, the stipends that you're talking about. But I'm also seeing that there's Bahamas with the sand dollar, Nigeria with the NIDA, and several Caribbean nations that have, like, centralized cash, and it's interesting. I don't there I think Europe is working on a digital euro.
Yeah, but
And I don't know if the US is working on a digital dollar.
Well, I mean, there's definitely politicians who think about it, but we have to absolutely avoid that, because to bring it back to how this life started, that would indeed
That would be cause for concern.
like, yeah, that would be that mark. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, throughout the ages and centuries, the problem with the wealth gap was always and will always be is who controls what value is, how it is stored, how is it transported, is it transferred, who can transfer it, and also who has the power to inject
regulate it. Yeah.
inject more of it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So inflation. We Bitcoiners and crypto enthusiasts believe in a future where storing money is decentralized and non-inflatable, and we believe that it will solve so many problems. It will stop the attrition of buying power, and it will stop the possibilities of governments endlessly printing money for, quite frankly, what most experts agree on is waging wars. That's what's really very expensive. And a lot of people think that wars are being waged in countries where we have no interest in doing so. But it is big business. Being at war with a nation is awesome business for a lot of people. So as always, there's various interests for and against, for whatever reasons, you know. But we say Bitcoin is the currency of peace, the money of peace. That's what we believe.
Yeah. But this has been a great conversation. I guess just to conclude, Bitcoin is not a centralized currency.
Nope.
You don't have a centralized bank. There is no branding or marking or anything like that. On the contrary, it's a step away from being regulated and controlled. And it's in limited supply, unlike money that is in most countries, and like the dollar. So it's just, hopefully that alleviates a little bit of the concerns that you might have about the state of the world. I do think you should always have your guard up, but you should also be open-minded and understand that there are beautiful things that can come from technological advancements, particularly if you try it. There's nothing wrong with trying it and seeing if it's something that you want. And looking up the testimonials about it too, and following Shankar, who's talking about it every day of our lives. And, this beautiful life that we're in, a lot of the exploration that we're doing these days is very much thanks to crypto. Specifically, lots of go to crypto.lifestyle if you want to find out all the ways to start your journey and just
Yeah, we need to do right by our dear friend and business partner, Shane Moray, who would say, did you have a call to action in your video? I should have said it way earlier, but we still have 13 of you with us across all platforms, which is really impressive. I definitely want to guide everyone through the exciting world of crypto and decentralized finance. So if we have piqued your interest, go to crypto.lifestyle. That's one of those new domain names. It's actually really, you type it in, crypto.lifestyle. I have a little video there and a form that you can fill out if you feel so inclined.
Yep. Well, thanks, Shankar, for agreeing to do this live with me about the concerns on Bitcoin. He did not, again, he had no idea what we were going to talk about.
I don't actually want to know what, most people, they want to have the script, the questions and all of that. I prefer not knowing anything. Although
Yeah.
you made it a challenging one for the first one, Andrea.
The reason
More end of the world.
Yes, let's begin with the end.
Religion.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful as well for the question. I hope that this has helped folks. You'll be seeing more of me because I think it's important to, in my case, I know there's a lot of people that are just starting from scratch. And because I'm a little bit further, not as far along, I just want to share what I know. And this is what I know. And so I hope that you have been, that you've enjoyed it. And we're going to do, when are we going to do this again?
All right. So Damien says, like Bitcoin, Trunk is a limited supply. And what a great time to be getting some while it's still under $1. Yes, Damien. Woo. Trunk.
Oh gosh, we're gonna start all over again.
Okay, just very quickly.
Oh Lord.
We just said that Bitcoin is already at $60,000, right? So it's very well still possible to buy it and let it appreciate. But what if you could buy a coin under $1 that has the potential to be $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 worth within a few months or years? That would really set you up for what could be generational wealth, and that is the Trunk token. I, by the way, have made quite a nice deal with Trunk. Invested $70,000 is my cost basis that I put into Trunk, and that's worth close to $500,000 now. So if that is something you are interested in, let me know, or let Damien know. He thinks I think we will have some very good times in the near future. Andrea, what are you doing?
I don't know.
You're trunking around.
No, I was trying to make you big, but now I'm just small. So I'm gonna put it back to how it was. This is great. When are we gonna do this again?
Damien, good job in kind of bringing Trunk in here.
Well, I wanted to bring it up earlier, but then I thought, oh goodness, we're about to end, so we'll just have to do this again. And the next time, we'll have to talk about, is it worth it to leave the U.S. and not pay such high taxes? Which is it's a wonderful problem. Oh, sorry.
Now we will report on what it's like to be serial entrepreneurs in Puerto Rico.
And with that, it's time to go. Thank you guys for being here. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.